Tonight's big stories. The manhunt for suspended Bamban Mayor Alice Guo continues, with her lawyer insisting she was still in the country. But Guo's Facebook page has been taken down after a lengthy post she made insisting she was Filipino.
ACT Teachers Partylist Representative Franz Castro and former Congressman Saturo Campo, along with 11 others, face jail time after a Davao court found them guilty of child abuse.
And world leaders, including President Marcos, roundly condemned the assassination attempt on former U.S. President Donald Trump. Incumbent President Joe Biden says there is no place for political violence in America.
Good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Shawn Yao.
Well, the search continues for the elusive Bamban Mayor Alice Guo. Over the weekend, at least 4 teams comprising officers from the Office of the Senate Sergeant at Arms, PNP, and Special Weapons and Tactics, or SWAT, raided her registered addresses.
But she was nowhere to be found. They also could not locate her alleged siblings nor her parents. The only person authorities were able to capture and detain was Go's accountant, Nancy Gamo.
And yet, Go had time to publish a lengthy post on Facebook, insisting that she is Filipino and that she loves the country very much. Rainiel Pawid with tonight's big story.
Suspended Banban Tarlac Mayor Alice Go remains at large. That's even with an all-out effort by the Office of the Senate Sergeant at Arms, aided by the PNP and a SWAT team, to search her and her alleged family's registered premises in Tarlac, Bulacan, and Valenzuela City over the weekend. Teams were sent to a garments factory in Moralo, Bulacan, and Valenzuela City, but failed to turn up the supposed siblings, Wesley, Sheila, and CMN. The alleged parents of Go, Jang Zong Go and Wen Yilin, have not been located either. Out of 8 individuals ordered arrested by the Senate, only Mayor's Alice's accountant, Nancy Gamo, has been taken into custody. She was arrested at her address in Caloocan City. But Go's legal counsel, Stephen David, says the mayor is certainly still in the Philippines.
I was talking with her for more than an hour, and she assured me that she's in the Philippines. Of course, I have to believe her. She just cannot get out of the country without being nabbed or apprehended at the exit points of the Philippines. So I believe she's in the country.
David also dismissed the documents presented in the Senate by Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, which showed that Go at one point attended elementary school at Grace Christian in Quezon City. He says the lawmaker should not be releasing these sensitive documents to the public first, as these are protected by the Data Privacy Act.
May possibility na genuine yan. May possibility na spurious yan. What I'm saying is, let them bring those documents before the proper forum so that we will be given the opportunity to authenticate, verify, determine the sources of these documents. Then only the court will say to us na ito pala genuine. What I'm trying to say, wag natin niya ilabas sa public because there is a trial by publicity to the detriment of any accused. Ang hirap kasing labanan ng isang public opinion kung massive masyado na yung propaganda laban sa innocence ng isang accused.
Senator Risa Hontiveros, who's been leading the probe, also slammed Go for being able to post on Facebook yet refusing to face the committee. Over the weekend, allegedly on her birthday, Go posted a lengthy statement on Facebook, in Taglish insisting she is a Filipino. She also said, "Mahal na mahal ko ang Pilipinas."
At Mayor Alice Guo o Guo Huaping, kung nakakapag-Facebook ka, siguro naman kaya mo nang humarap sa Senado. Ginamit mo pa ang Facebook para sa pagpapakalat ng fake news na Pilipino kayo. Hindi ka Pilipino. Ang titibay na ng ebidensya. Nakakainsulto sa mamamayan na ginamit mo ang nasyonalidad namin para magpayaman, manloko, at magpasok ng mga pogo na puro krimen ang dala sa bansa.
But as of press time, Go's Facebook page is down and all its posts inaccessible. Along with this, Senator Hontiveros also bared that Go has alleged connections to Hong Jiang-yang, who is said to be a brother of Michael Yang. This information comes from the records of the Anti-Money Laundering Council. Yang was involved in the Pharmaly issue due to the alleged purchase of overpriced COVID-19 supplies by the government during the Duterte administration. There was reportedly a direct transaction between Go's company Baofu and a joint account of two individuals. These individuals are Zeng Kan Yu, an incorporator of the Pogo raided in Bamban, and Hong Jiangyang, who is allegedly the brother of Michael Yang.
Sabi ko nga, mukhang one big happy Pharmaly pala itong mga Pogo at Pharmaly members. Baka nga itong Pharmaly pala ang farm na kinalakihan ni Alice Guo. Kung ma-establish namin na talagang may connection, naging mataas na advisor siya kay Duterte at malapit sa dating presidente, then of course may tatanong din namin kung ano yung posibleng koneksyon ng dating presidente sa Pogos na ito.
Hontiveros is now looking into whether former President Rodrigo Duterte has any connection to this. Hontiveros is now looking into whether former President Rodrigo Duterte has any connection to this, as Yang was his former economic advisor. The Senate committee will also be investigating Yang's connection to several individuals involved in illegal pogos in the country. They will also discuss whether Yang needs to be summoned for the next Senate committee hearing, which is scheduled for July 29th. But there are reports that Michael Yang has fled to Dubai. For News 5, Rainiel Pawid, we are One News.
Speaking of jail time, another person who is facing that is ACT Teachers Partylist Representative Franz Castro, who, along with 12 others, was found guilty of child abuse by a court in Davao del Norte. Marian Enriquez reports.
A Tagum Regional Trial Court in Davao convicted ACT Teachers Partylist Representative Franz Castro, former Bayan Muna Representative Satur Ocampo, and 11 others of child abuse. The case stemmed from a solidarity mission they did back in 2018 involving Lumad schools in Talaingod, Davao del Norte. Castro, in a press conference today, maintained that they only sought to rescue minors from a paramilitary group that took hold of the area, but they were then charged with kidnapping and child trafficking. The court has now reduced the charges to just child abuse. In its decision, the court said the group failed to take the necessary precautions to ensure the safety of the children while they were being transported. Castro said she is dismayed over the verdict.
As teacher, ang naging trabaho ko naman talaga ay pangalagaan yung kapakanan ng mga estudyante. At ganitong kaso pa yung ikakaso sa akin, no, in child abuse. Kaya parang masama yung loob ko sa ganitong desisyon ng judge.
Castro and the other co-accused now face 4 up to 6 years in prison and 20,000 pesos in fines. But since the charge is a bailable offense, they can enjoy freedom while they appeal the verdict.
Binigit namin ng assurance na lalabanan namin itong kaso hanggang ma-dismiss. Wala sa background namin ang ma-involve sa anumang hindi ka nais na activity. Malakas
po ang loob namin na ito ay madidismiss at the end of the rope, no? At haharapin namin ito. Hindi kami magtatago, no? Hindi namin iiwasan ang batas.
Castro also called on President Bongbong Marcos to help Lumad children and ensure their well-being and access to education.
Ako personally, nananawagan kay President Marcos Jr. na pangalagaan itong ating mga lumad children. Sila yung na marginalized, no, sa matagal ng panahon, napabayaan yung ating mga lumad children.
Despite this latest legal battle, Castro said she will remain focused on her duties in Congress as well as her senatorial bid next year. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
Moving over to the big story in America, the assassination attempt on former U.S. President Donald Trump. Video footage showed a bullet grazing Trump's right ear, but eventually he stood up, pumped his fist, and was hustled out of the premises by Secret Service agents. The suspect, who was said to be less than 500 feet away from where Trump was speaking in Pennsylvania, carried a semi-automatic rifle and opened fire, killing one person from the stands and critically injuring others. The shooter was then killed by the Secret Service, but not before a stray bullet also killed a 50-year-old firefighter named Cory Comperatore, who dove in to protect his family from the shots when they rang out. Witnesses recall the turn of events.
And it wasn't like in 6 minutes. All you saw was like, you can hear like two bullets just like flying over. The second bullet, just guessing, hit the forklift on Donald Trump's left side. Everybody ducked down. Trump was down. 2 seconds later, he's getting up. Everybody just like lost it, start panicking, running, screaming. It was a total. It was like in the movies. It was insane.
It was really clear that something was going on. Come to find out later that was one of the other victims. There was a lot of blood. There were several people who seemed to have blood on their shirts. I guess they were trying to take care of that person. They were carrying him out. It was this really grisly scene to our left with what was going on with the bleachers.
In an address from the Oval Office on Sunday night, U.S. President Joe Biden called on Americans to reject political violence and come together in unity.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence, for any violence ever. Period. No exceptions. We can't allow this violence to be normalized. You know, the political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. While unity is the most elusive of goals right now, nothing is more important for us now than standing together. We can do this.
President Marcos joined world leaders in condemning the incident. In his statement posted to X, formerly Twitter, he said, "It is with great relief that we receive the news that former President Donald Trump is fine and well after the attempt to assassinate him. Our thoughts and prayers are with him and his family. Together with all democracy-loving peoples around the world, we condemn all forms of political violence. The voice of the people must always remain supreme." On the whole, world leaders roundly condemned the political violence and expressed their support for those affected. For instance, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau posted also on X, "I'm sickened by the shooting at former President Trump. It cannot be overstated. Political violence is never acceptable." While French President Emmanuel Macron said a spectator has died, several are injured. It is a tragedy for our democracies. France shares the shock and indignation of the American people.
And joining us tonight to talk about this incident, we have with us John Jose. He is the founder of American Tomorrow Project and former National Director for Asian American and Pacific Islander Engagement for the Republican National Committee. Good evening to you, John.
Good evening, Gretchen, Shawn, and Regina. Thank you so much for having me on. Pleasure and privilege to be on here tonight.
Good morning, your time.
All right.
Yes, good morning.
First of all, I just wanted to set the context here. Were you at the rally in Pennsylvania, and where are you right now? How have you been coping with the incident?
No, I was not in the rally in Pennsylvania. I was traveling from Washington, D.C. to here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, looking forward here for the upcoming RNC convention. And coping with this news has been a shock to all of us. First and foremost, I was worried about my former colleagues and former coworkers that were behind the scenes at the Trump rally. Of course, in the Secret Service for doing their work. And, you know, of course, like you said, one casualty with Cory Comperatore's family, who he threw himself in front of the bullet to protect his family. So this is a real situation that was developing over the past couple of days. And it's definitely taken the Republican Party by storm, but I think it's also united and energized the party even more.
Right, Jen, I caught your guesting earlier at our sister show, StoryCon. So by now, I already know that you are a staunch Republican. And obviously, you're going to the RNC. They're expecting about 50,000 people. This is a big event, 4 days. It is also going to be indoor as opposed to outdoors. I just wanted to get your thoughts on how Republicans there think this is going to impact the campaign overall.
Yeah, to be honest, I think this is going to bring a time of unity to the party in the sense of this. If you look back in the history from 2016 to 2024 in terms of the Republican conventions, In 2016, we've had an open kind of somewhat convention. President Trump at that point was trying to convince the rest of the Republican Party that he was the right nominee and became the nominee in 2016. And then, of course, in 2020, because of COVID, we didn't have an in-person convention. So now looking upcoming 2024 convention, Republican Party now is more united than ever in terms of backing President Trump. Now waiting for his VP announcement and who's going to tap to be the next VP candidate. And from then on, it's the job of those candidates and the Republican Party to take the message out to the American people and find a way to earn their votes for this upcoming election in November.
For me, John, there are two broader questions that this incident raised. One is the immediate implications on the elections. You already pointed out what you think might happen, but also how to halt the growing violence in the U.S., political as well as otherwise. Do you think a second Trump presidency might have what it takes to address that? Pointing out, of course, that President Trump himself is also 78 years old.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of this upcoming race, when it comes to toning down the temperature down, obviously we saw President Biden come up yesterday and have his address in the Oval Office. And for time as it is now, it is needed and appropriate coming from this position. Of course, President Trump as well, I think the reports that's been coming out on what he's going to address in this upcoming convention is going to be somewhat more of a uniting message. I think from the reports we've seen, he scrapped his previous message on what he's going to say, but more on the focus of uniting the country now, uniting the nation now, because we're seeing an opportunity, where you can see the Republican Party that is uniting towards President Trump, while on the other hand, despite this issue that's happening, if you look back from 3 weeks ago at the debate till even now, the Democrats still have no idea if it's going to be Joe Biden or are they going to find somebody else to run for his nomination in the convention coming up in August for the Democrats. So those are bigger issues that I believe that the Democrats have to solve and make a case to the American people. For the past 3.5 years, they've been making a case, and as you can see, the polls have not been popular towards President Biden, and you can see a lot more folks are moving towards President Trump, especially now with this case. I've been hearing from Filipino Americans all across this country that's coming out the woodwork that's like, man, President Trump, he doesn't need to be taking any of this, right? He could be spending his time in his resorts and his golf courses, but he's out there sharing his message to the American people and getting shot in a minute and with it, right? So it's definitely a time for a place for Republicans now to take this narrative and really take the battle to the ballot boxes, right? And that's where they want to see the change and the tide turn. President Trump now is really encouraging folks to really turn out and express their messages and their concerns through the ballot box and beat the Democrats this upcoming November.
John, investigations are underway as to the background of the shooter, Thomas Crooks, and his reasons. There are also investigations on the Secret Service. Can you give us a picture on what talk is like on possible motivations, possible suspects, and just conversations around you regarding the shooting?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at in the terms of the Secret Service and the criminal Thomas Crooks, I've been in these rallies multiple times, and the way they've kind of screen and have their protocol when it comes to Secret Service, they do these initial sweeps. And if you look at the building where the shooter was, this is outside of the main security perimeter, right? And so there's definitely a lapse in the protocol and what happened, and lots of questions that the Republicans are asking that and the country is asking about what happened within the Secret Service, right? Is it a lack of manpower, or was it a lack of protocol, or was it just they got too comfortable and let something slip by, which in the eyes of the Secret Service is an automatic failure. President Reagan was shot in 1981, and even though for something like that, that's automatically a failure, and to Secret Service eyes, what happened on Saturday is equally the same thing, with a casualty and the former president getting hit. So there's definitely lots of questions when it comes to this and investigations that the country's going to look forward to. And I think that the FBI and the Secret Service are really opening up internally on what's happened, and hopefully we get to the bottom of this sooner than later. Because it's not only like in terms of President Trump when we're talking about lack of Secret Service protection, right? I mean, even the third-party candidate, Robert F. Kennedy, doesn't even have Secret Service detail, and you know what happened to his father and his uncle. And so these are situations that needs to be taken care of by the Secret Service so that we prevent more situations like this down the road.
What about the Second Amendment? Have discussions around that grown louder since the shooting, since this attempted assassination attempt, or how are discussions on the Second Amendment or the
Not
right
necessarily
to bear
in the
arms?
Republican Party. You know, when it comes to the Second Amendment rights that right for every American to have when it comes to bearing arms, you know, I think we got to pivot the situation and think about the person's mental health, right? If this guy is going to commit some sort of violence, it doesn't need to take a gun. It can be whatever he wants to do to make his mission accomplished, right? And so what we want to look at and think about is like, okay, yeah, he has a gun because through his family or because of his hobbies, his shooting, part of like his school activities or whatever. But we got to talk about and think about like, what's his patterns? Why are we not seeing these patterns come out, these red flags that he's trying to show, or what's his manifesto, right? So there's still a lot of things to get in the bottom of. But I think instead of focusing on the gun violence, we focus on the mental health of this person for wanting to cause this sort of violence in front of people.
Well, John, this definitely isn't the last rally we're seeing, and we do hope the questions get answered, and also it's an opportunity to rein in terms of security, and we do hope for more peaceful rallies and better conditions out there. Thank you so much for your time tonight. John Jose, former National Director for Asian American and Pacific Islander Engagement for the Republican National Committee. Well, up next, what can a defense pact between the Philippines and France bring to the table amid heightened tensions in the West Philippine Sea? We'll put that question to geopolitical analyst Benjamin Blandon when the big story returns. Keep it here. Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News. France is planning to submit by September the first draft of a defense pact with the Philippines, which will enable joint military training and increase access for French troops in the country.
That France would be the one to start writing a first draft of a VFA because the Philippines were actively engaged, you know that, in the negotiation of the reciprocal access agreement with Japan. So that's why they agreed that France would take the pen to write the first draft, and I think they did not commit to any specific timing, but maybe by September, autumn period, France will be in a position to issue the first draft, and that would be then possibly the start of discussions between the Philippines and France.
This zero draft will serve as the foundation for negotiations into a full-blown visiting forces agreement between Manila and Paris. According to French Ambassador Marie Fontanelle, discussions began after a meeting between Filipino and French defense officials in Paris in May, where France was tasked with preparing the initial draft. Under President Marcos, France has boosted its security engagements with the Philippines. In April of this year, the French Navy joined this year's Balikatan exercises with the United States for the first time ever.
Joining us now to discuss the possible defense pact between the Philippines and France, we have with us geopolitical analyst Benjamin Blandon, who is here with us live in the studio. As you can see, Benjamin is a network coordinator at the Yokosuka Council for Asia-Pacific Studies. He's also a PhD candidate in geopolitics, focusing on the phenomena of asymmetric warfare in the South China Sea at the Paris Catholic University. Asymmetric warfare is a very interesting topic, which we will get to shortly. But first, Philippines-France Defense Pact. We're getting serious now, aren't we? She just read it. Under President Marcos, the Philippines, France has increased its security engagements with the Philippines. Help us appreciate the value of this defense pact? What will it bring to the table?
For me, this visiting force agreement is really a proof of the growing ties between the two countries, a proof of trust also, and a sign that France wants, as part of its broader Indo-Pacific strategy, to engage more with Southeast Asian countries, more with South Pacific countries, and particularly with the Philippines.
But why? What is what's in it for France? What's the rationale behind it?
Well, there's always this thought that France, but also other countries, might be looking for specific advantages. But actually, France has been a long partner of Malaysia, Singapore, many other countries of the region. So here it's more about setting an official framework behind the cooperation that is already ongoing.
But as deep as getting a visiting forces agreement, do you think we're really going to go there? Because it's quite understandable getting that from Japan, getting that from Australia, being neighbors in the same region, but France is very far from us. Can you help us understand how we got to this point?
Yes. Well, as you mentioned, there's been the innocent passages, the port calls, and discussions that have taken place about having joint exercise, naval exercise. And you notice that France has recently nominated a permanent defense attaché. So it's also, again, a proof of French engagement and the fact that we are taking the relation with the Philippines seriously.
So is that, the usual lines that we hear to uphold international order, etc.?
I wouldn't say France has such a great ambition. We have a limited naval means anyway, but still France is quite a unique country within Europe because we have territories, populations, permanent military assets both in the Indian Ocean but also Pacific Ocean. NATO, we are the permanent consul of NATO. We are a nuclear power, so there's plenty of things behind France, and we're not specifically looking. Well, it's my assumption at least that France is specifically looking to have some kind of return on investment. We are not going to insist on the Philippines acquiring the submarines, for example, if the country
decides. As opposed to which country?
But if the Philippines really decide to go that way, France will be a good partner in it. And if Philippines decide not to acquire them, the VFA will be probably signed anyway. So I wouldn't think there's second thoughts behind that discussions.
Okay. Let's talk about asymmetric warfare, which is your area of expertise. First, talk us through what you call the true nature of the threat in South China Sea, and what exactly asymmetric warfare is in relation to the South China Sea.
Well, at the beginning of my research, there were two assumptions. The first one is that there's a great deal of confusion about what is happening in the South China Sea. Some people will call what's happening area denial, some call it hybrid warfare, some call it gray zone tactics. My opinion is that it's neither specific of the three specifically, but all of them all at once. And so my research is more about listing the phenomena that are happening, mapping who is doing what, when, with what kind of intensity, diversity, regularity. And in the end, I was able to list about 200 phenomena so far, and it's a constantly updated list, and divided in 12 categories. So some correspond to the most graphic things that we have seen recently, like the June 17th, but it's actually a small fraction of the whole of what is happening, because and by the way, China is about 90% of that list of 200 phenomena. And what is very unique to the South China Sea is that China is, not just China, but mostly China, is using these phenomena not separately, but side by side, working together, helping each other, even sometimes allowing each other, like reclaiming Mischief Reef or Subi Reef or Fury Cross Reef, allowed for China to deploy much more often, much longer, its maritime militia or its Coast Guard.
Okay. So what can you give us a better idea? I mean, what's been happening the most out of the phenomena that you've recorded? What has baffled you? And I mean, give us an idea of how you're able to track these movements.
Yes. Yeah. So first of all, it's not just the quantity. Of course, there's more and more incidents, that's for sure. But there's also more regularity, more diversity, more intensity in the means that China is pushing forward to advance its interest. We noticed a clear switch from, like, if you focus on the data from CSIS China Powers, they listed 73 major incidents between 2010 and 2020, and at that time 50% were with Vietnam, 25% with the Philippines. And actually all the way since 2019, it's reversed. Now it's Philippines that is much more on the line of these incidents, first of all. And second of all, China is not just applying pressure or using violence, but it's also manipulating national and international law, HADR, economy, with all sorts of sanctions, propaganda, communication. There's really plenty. In total, I could list so far 12 different categories of phenomena.
Before we go to the 12 categories, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned in 2019 it seemed to shift, right?
Sure.
So whereas before it was mostly between China and Vietnam, now it's mostly between China and the Philippines. 2019, that was smack dab in the middle of President Duterte's term, so no major political shift there. What happened? What did you see?
Well, it happened that there was two incidents, major incidents in the east of Vietnam, where China tried to deploy an oil rig at the one time and some exploration, oil and gas exploration ship at the second time. And I think that Vietnam really considered it was a life and death situation where if it didn't resist, it would have to submit. And then on both incidents, Vietnam deployed every single ship that they had, and they applied transparentizing, by the way, and they allowed for public demonstration, which is quite rare in Vietnam. And I think China was not ready for the whole for everything that unleashed against them. So they tried 2014, didn't work. They tried again 2019, and I think they understood it was not going the right way for them, and that maybe they had to switch. I'm very sorry about that, to a weaker target, or what they considered to be a weaker target.
And
so in short, Vietnam stood up.
Yeah, they stood up.
Well, it doesn't mean that everything is rosy and fine for Vietnam now, but what is sure is that we moved from 50% to Vietnam to now 50% to the Philippines.
You also studied different means of deterrence.
Yes.
Talk us through some of them and which ones have worked and which ones have not.
Well, it's my conviction since I started my thesis that using lethal force is not going to work, either at the individual country, so Philippines against China, or the whole of ASEAN against China. There is such a disparity in the military means, in the military might, that I don't think it's going to lead anywhere. But still, it doesn't mean there's no things that can be done. And first of all, I think the position of the Philippines now is much better now than it was 5 years ago. The Philippines acquired the BrahMos hypersonic missiles. It multiplied the alliance and partnership with other countries. It modernized. It started really modernize the Navy and Coast Guard. So all of this is positive, and none of those can work alone. It really needs to go as a family of deterrence. So my work, part of my work, is about maritime domain awareness, and I'm pushing forward, and it's connected to transparency. It means for the Philippines to apply transparency not alone, but as a group with Malaysia and Vietnam, for example, and which is what we call joint maritime domain awareness. Because
is that ever going to happen, though?
He doesn't ask for much, does he? I mean, come on, with Malaysia and Vietnam.
Yes. Well, no, there's hope. I published a paper in The Diplomat about the growing ties between the Philippines and Vietnam, and it's my opinion that the ties have grown so much that what exists now between the two countries can be really considered a de facto code of conduct.
Do you think the focus of China shifted to the Philippines because of our country's transparency initiative?
I wouldn't, no, I don't consider that there's a direct connection. It's really, they tried 2014, they tried 2019, it didn't work. And you have to remember that in the past there was already naval battles or ground battles between Vietnam and China. The naval battle worked, but the ground one didn't work back in 1979. So I think they knew what could eventually happen if things kept worsening.
What has Vietnam done right?
You mean in the last years? Okay, well, it's really interesting because the Philippines and Vietnam have had completely different strategies. Vietnam invested quite little in growing its Navy or Coast Guard, but it spent billions in expanding, reclaiming, and improving the maritime features that they control in the Spratlys, whereas the Philippines invested quite little amount of money on improving or reclaiming islands, but they spend a lot in acquiring ships. So those are two very different strategies, but also complementary strategies in the prospect of an eventual joint initiative of the two countries.
But also, as you pointed out, Vietnam back in 2019 and 2014 stood up to China, right?
Sure.
They didn't let themselves get pushed back. To your point about joint transparency initiatives with Malaysia and Vietnam, one of the reasons it may also not be feasible or a reality is Vietnam has much deeper economic ties with China than the Philippines does, right? So, you know, I'm not just laughing at you for no reason, but just the idea of it sounds so far-fetched at this point in time that I have to question, is there any other strategy that's more within reach of the Philippines?
Well, all of those three countries are confronted, whether they want to recognize or not, they are confronted to China's asymmetric warfare, and I hope they are going to cooperate together, but if it was not to be the case, there are other things the Philippines can do. First of all, it can keep doing what I already mentioned they are doing. They can also keep building the resilience between the population, educate the population about all that concerns the maritime domain. And also, it's my opinion that the Philippines should stop shying away from exploiting its maritime boundaries the way it should, like any normal country should. Because if you look at what we call the blue economy or the maritime economy, there's many sectors that are stagnant at best. Some sectors are even decreasing, like the cable laying, oil and gas exploration and production, or fish catch. But, and some other sectors just don't exist. No cruise, no tourism, no wind farms, no blue hydrogen, no very little subsea archaeology or other sectors. And I believe it's really because there's so little what I call eyes at sea, government eyes, public eyes, private eyes, that China can do whatever it's doing.
Those eyes might be busy inland.
So I would really encourage the Philippines, quite humbly, but I would like to encourage the Philippines to just boost its maritime economy and start authorizing cruise, authorizing tourism, sport fishing, yachting, all sorts of maritime activities.
Building ships even. We had that industry way back.
We also have a maritime blue zones bill, I think, coming out. Maybe they're waiting for that framework. Or do you think a framework or a legislation is not necessary for us to, so to speak, do activities first and wait for the legislation to follow?
Well, I would say maritime legislation is always better to have than not to have. So, yeah, that's always good. But I think one of the weak points that was identified by the authorities was the regulation of civilian transport of goods and personnel, which is which can be improved.
In your study of asymmetric warfare, first of all, I'd like you to define that. Is it just a bigger country versus a country like ours, the Philippines? And what strategies usually succeed in asymmetric warfare? What do you need? What are your chess pieces? What are our chess pieces?
Yes. Well, there's the trick with asymmetric warfare is that when you want to deter or counter it, there's not a playbook. It really adapts to very specific situations. So there is not a specific set of action that I can advise that could match or work for any countries. What is very specific is that it's not one phenomena, it's a multitude of phenomena all at once happening at different places. So it's really hard.
Maybe one example?
Yes. Well, I mentioned the fact of developing the maritime economy or boosting those partnerships, the visiting forces agreement, the reciprocal access agreement, the fact of organizing those joint air patrol, naval patrols, really actually act in as many sectors and as many domains as possible, because China is doing just that.
Okay, so let's go back to what you were saying, 200 incidents that you've studied, which you have divided into 12 categories. Can you talk us quickly through these categories? Maybe the picture will become clearer.
Okay, so I'll try to do them all. So there's economy, infrastructure, capacity building, HADR, higher education and research, diplomacy, propaganda and communication, aggressive lethal means and aggressive non-lethal means. Yeah, so it's pretty good.
Just to define terms, HADR is humanitarian and disaster response. Yeah.
In your study of China, what have they responded to?
Sorry, can you?
What have they responded to in the way? Which fields? What are they afraid of? I mean, since we're talking about warfare here.
Yes.
What have you noticed that China responds to?
I think generally China doesn't like being pointed out for doing bad things, even though it's doing bad things. But transparentizing, there was some kind of dispute between the spokesperson of the Coast Guard recently and a Filipino researcher who said transparentizing in itself is not a strategy. But I think the authorities never said transparentizing was the alpha and omega of everything they intended to do. Otherwise, they would not have invested in building up the Navy and Coast Guard or acquiring the BrahMos or those air radars from Japan.
Okay, let's take it from there, though. Like, is there a broader strategy that you're seeing?
Wait, sorry. To follow up that question, you were talking about a conversation with different defense and security analysts, and the other part of that conversation, which another defense analyst just published a paper or an article on.
Oh, it was more a comment on social media.
Right, right. Says that China has long stopped responding to reputational damage, right? This is Xi Jinping's China. It no longer reacts as much to,
but in the
reputational risks the way that they did maybe 20 years ago. And so that's why the Transparency Initiative does not have as much teeth now, is the argument. What do you think?
I would say the Filipino government is on a tightrope because on the one side it needs to defend the national interest, but on the other side it also needs to be strong enough to push forward as far and as strong as it can. And the Philippines is on the way to be stronger with the BrahMos, with the radars, the air radars, naval radars, and so on. But many people ask, why doesn't the government use the MDT? Why don't they, after the June 17th incident? But it's a little bit like the story of Peter and the wolf. If the Philippines cry for the wolf too early, it might cancel the Joker card, which the MDT can be. So if it goes too fast or too rapidly, it could be not usable anymore.
Having said all of that, though, how do you see the next supply mission to the Sierra Madre playing out? Do you see it as more hotter, cooler?
Well, there have been different suggestions on how to go about it.
Well, I'm not in the secret of the gods. I've not been told how it's going to happen. But I think it's going to be cooler than the last time, because probably the authorities on both sides are going to work out some kind of protocol for allowing or making those raw emissions possible.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that plays out, indeed. We're going to have to leave the conversation there for now. Benjamin Blandon, he is a geopolitical analyst and PhD candidate focusing on the phenomena of asymmetric warfare in the South China Sea at Paris Catholic University. Thank you so much for your time today.
Goodbye.
Moving on to other news, Moralo customers will see an increase in their July electric bill by 2 pesos per kilowatt hour. Moralo attributed the adjustment to higher generation charges as power costs normalized following artificially low rates last June. June rates were supposed to be higher than May, but Moralo slashed its rate after the ERC ordered the postponement of the collection of the wholesale electricity spot market or Western portion of the generation charge. This was to soften the financial impact on consumers due to power outages experienced across the country. Despite the increase, Moralo says rates may go down in the coming Burr months.
Nakita na natin sa spot market na dahil nagsimula na yung tag-ulan, bumaba na rin yung demand at nag-i-improve na rin yung reserve levels in the spot market, kaya bumababa din ang presyo in the spot market. So hopefully this will continue and we can reflect this in the August generation charge.
All right, now moving on to the weather or weather-related news. At least 5 people, including 4 children, are reported dead from flash floods in Mindanao. Several areas remain submerged in floodwaters after days of non-stop rains affecting thousands of families. Authorities also continue to search for at least a dozen individuals that are still missing. Meanwhile, cloudy skies with scattered rain showers and thunderstorms still prevail over the NCR, southern Luzon, Mimaropa, and the western Visayas due to the southwest monsoon or habagat. The rest of the country also is experiencing isolated rain showers due to localized thunderstorms. Now, Pag-asa is also keeping its eyes on a low-pressure area east of Davao City, which could develop into a cyclone, and if it comes to that, it will be given the local name Butchoy.
Time now for some updates on our Olympians as the Olympic Games Paris 2024 winds down to its last 11 days before the opening ceremonies. This time, let's zoom in on our gymnastics team. Of course, leading the pack is none other than our golden boy, Kaloy Yulo. Yulo continued this rigorous training over the weekend at the Les Arañas training camp in Metz, France. Back in Tokyo 2020, Yulo was just a fraction of a point away from winning an Olympic medal after finishing 4th in the men's vault final. This time around, a 24-year-old gymnast hopes to finally bring home the gold for the Philippines. Also ramping up their preparations are Filipina gymnasts Alea Finnegan and Levi Jung Rui Vivar. Finnegan arrived in Metz over the weekend, while Jung Rui Vivar has been busy with her own set of preparations for the Games. This will be their first Olympic appearance for the Philippines as they look to secure a medal for the country.
And just before we say goodbye, let's also check out a local sporting event here in the Philippines. This year's edition of the Toyota Gazoo Racing Philippine Cup kicks off with new racing formats. Merimon Reyes with the details.
The country's premier racing series returns for its 10th iteration this year. The first leg of the Toyota Gazoo Racing Philippine Cup kicked off at the Clark International Speedway over the weekend. This year's race featured new formats, the sprint and endurance races. The first one was a 12-lap and 30-minute format, while the other was a 1.5-hour circuit. The lineup for circuit racers included race enthusiasts and social media influencers Ref Bangsil and Lexi Menjola.
So there was a lot of skill training that we had to do just to be able to get here and of course drive safe, be safe to your other drivers, and at the same time be aggressive enough to be able to win.
It's been a big jump from, autocross all the way to circuit racing. So it was quite the experience, but I'm having the time of my life. I've never felt more alive, to be honest, and I think I found my passion.
Toyota Motor Philippines President Masando Hashimoto also graced the event. In addition to the thrilling races, TGR showcased driving exhibitions and a sim racing experience booth, adding to the excitement of the weekend. The weekend saw several familiar and new faces take home first place. The winner for the novice class of the sprint race 1 was Jamil Lacuna. Bong Garnes for the promotional class, Giro Garbes for the sporting class, and Red Diwa for super sporting. For the sprint race 2, Russell Reyes was named the winner of the novice class. Julia de Los Angeles for the promotional class, Jay Lau for sporting, and Russell Cabrera for super sporting class. Russell Reyes was also the winner in the novice class of the endurance race. Other winners included Julia de Los Angeles for the promotional class, Danzel Wei Tan for sporting, and Inigo Anton for the super sporting class. Elvin Luciano, Vice President for Marketing Services at Toyota Motor Philippines, stated that this year's edition has been enhanced for a more intense racing experience.
For this year, we are intensifying the races, and at the same time, we are getting stronger on our message of Toyota Gazoo Racing Philippine Cup as a gateway or stepping stone for racing talents to further their skills and their career.
As the Toyota Gazoo Racing season unfolds, Luciano expressed gratitude to all racing fans across the country for their unwavering support of the TGR Philippine Cup.
We have nothing but thanks for our race fans, the racing communities, the racers and the racing teams who have been participating in Toyota's Motorsport Series throughout the years. Obviously, we wouldn't have reached 10 years of a motorsports legacy without your support and your active participation.
Mobile journalist Mary Monreyes, we are One News.
And of course, it is July 15, so we are one day late, but better late than never. So big belated happy birthday to our big boss, Mr. Manny V. Pangilinan, or MVP. His birthday was yesterday. July 14.
He said he was starting his 79th year working and planning for the future.
Kaya nga.
And also, wait, we're not done yet. Happy birthday also to our MediaQuest President and CEO, Miss Jane Basas. Her birthday is today na.
Working day din yan for sure.
Monday na Monday.
Hardworking people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maraming VIP na mag-birthday. And July 19, it'll be Jose Rizal.
But also one thing we forgot in sports, we have a new Wimbledon champion.
Yes, we do.
Alcaraz.
And sumipot si Princess Catherine,
That's right.
Princess of Wales.
That's
Also a big
right.
deal.
That was nice to see. She looks well.
She looks so good
Right?
in her purple dress.
And she looks well. More
Birthday din
importantly.
ng Will to Win ngayon.
Happy birthday na. Hindi naman tao yung show. Pero sige, happy birthday.
Yung show niya, first day today.
Bago pa tayo mauwi sa kung ano-ano, that's it.
Too many greetings ba?
Ang dami na natin pinapasalamatan at binabate, but that's it for the big story tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.